welcome to Healthy TV episode number 39. And on today's show, I'm talking about breakups, separations. Yes, the pain that goes along with those and how you can address that pain and move on, actually. And so I'm going to share at toward the end a great exercise, and I hope that can really help. First of all, though, I got to talk about my Easter shirt, because I chose this one specifically for you guys today. So happy Easter to those of you who celebrate Easter, and those of you who are just looking forward to the long weekend, awesome. It's going to be a great long weekend. And I thought, because I've been dealing with talking about this theme of happiness and sharing with you kind of my own journey around building and cultivating more happiness, I thought I'd go a little bit deeper and maybe give you a bit of context for why that's such a focus for me, because I've been actually approached by a few friends recently who've had some difficult breakups, separations, and the question was, how do I deal with this? How can I actually help my brain to move on? And those of you who've gone through a difficult breakup or separation, you know that this is it can be a really terrible place to be in, and your brain can do really, I would say, really nasty things to keep you kind of mired down in all those kind of deep, dark, depressing thoughts. And I wanted to share in this video an excellent exercise that I got exposed to, and that really helped me to just kind of reorient my thoughts, okay, to allow me to kind of, I'm not going to say to get rid of those negative, bad, sort of painful thoughts, but just to kind of reframe them and help my brain to start focusing on the positive things and on the, and actually how to kind of move myself back toward happiness. So I'll get into that in a moment, but actually this topic really requires a little bit of a foundation, and as you're probably getting used to, I like to dive into the kind of evolutionary foundation, because really that's where our history lies, and how our brain works in the modern day is really rooted in how it evolved over hundreds of thousands of years. And we'll frame it around relationships, but really change is something that our brain is really it's well equipped to deal with, but it has a particular method of dealing with change. And this goes back in the day when when faced with a major change that we had to kind of manage, our brain was really good at predicting the worst case scenarios, the negative outcomes. And in fact, if you think about it, that would be a very valuable survival mechanism, to be able to predict all of the potential negative outcomes that could happen from a particular change in our environment. And because of that, we'd be able to have a better opportunity to kind of set ourselves up so that we didn't succumb to those potential or those predictions. Okay, and so that, just multiply that over hundreds of thousands of years, we became very, very good at predicting negative outcomes. And your brain nowadays, we fast forward, because back in the day we had very few, relatively few variables to deal with, right? It was about finding food, finding shelter, finding high, dry land to build camps, dealing with predators, maybe dealing with neighboring tribes. But all those things, really, there's a few numbers, and we probably had very few challenges, really, in the big scheme of things, very few challenges to actually deal with. Now, fast forward to today's age, where we just are faced with challenges all the time, right? And change is happening so quickly, and our brain still applies that same process. And so let's apply this in the context of a relationship, and maybe at the ending of a relationship. It doesn't have to be a love relationship, but this could be a business relationship, it could be a friendship. But still, when faced with this change, your brain automatically kicks into this prediction of negative outcomes. What are the worst case scenarios that are going to come out of that experience in the future? And this just happens naturally, happens automatically. You can't actually stop that from happening. It's hardwired. It's deeply set in your brain. And so actually, I got a simple chart here, because I thought this is actually how I had to really simplify it so that I could make sense of it in my own head. But really, what happens is that, so let's say we get, there's a separation or a breakup, and whether you're the one responsible for it or not, there's still all this pain that you go through. And a big part of that pain is you tend to focus on the things that the positive things that you're no longer going to get access to, and then all of the negative things that you're going to gain. So let's reframe that. So let's say the positive things that that you kind of relate to that relationship, that all of a sudden you're no longer going to get access to, and in the future maybe all the positive things that you had thought about as it relates to that relationship, all those things are no longer going to happen. Okay, so our brain tends to focus on those, and then it tends to focus on then all of those worst case scenarios, those things that like the negative potential outcomes that could happen. So all the bad things that could happen now that you're not in that relationship. So that your brain does that automatically. But I like drawing it out this way because oftentimes if you just let your subconscious just pump out this the kind of negative stream of information, then you can get really mired down and just like, wow, that was like a bad decision, or man, I don't really want this change anymore. So you can really get caught up in the kind of negative outcomes as a result of that breakup or separation. When in fact, there's two whole other quadrants that your brain essentially ignores, okay, like as a kind of automatic process. And so this is where you actually have to choose to think in these categories. And so there's the other two. So you can actually, instead of focusing on the negative things that could happen in the future as a result of this kind of separation, you can actually focus on all the positive things, right? All the benefits that you're going to gain now that you're no longer in that relationship. And similarly, you can focus on all of the negative things that you're now going to avoid. So the key point here, though, is that you have to force your brain to think in these categories. It'll do these ones automatically, but you have to force it. You have to consciously think through what are all the positive things I'm now going to gain, and what are all the negative things I'm now going to avoid. Okay, so I hope that's helpful, because what I would suggest is that if, let's say, you are going through a separation or a breakup or some big shift that maybe you feel like a little bit out of control, sit down with a pen, piece of paper, chunk off some time. I would recommend at least 30 minutes, preferably like a 2 to 3 hour window, because this process, once you get started, you may find that you have a lot to write about. But really just sit down and write out those two questions. What are all the positive things I'm now going to gain as a result of being out of this relationship, and what are all the negative things I'm going to avoid as a result of ending this relationship? And I think you'll find, if you allow your brain to go into those categories, you'll probably find that there's lots of things in there, you're just not focusing on them. Now here's the real value. So if there's the kind of real-time value of writing them out and starting to see that, like, wow, okay, I've actually generated a pretty big list here. But when your brain falls into those old kind of patterns of focusing on the negative stuff, you can pull this sheet out and read through. And actually, usually just by reading a handful of them, you'll actually shift your brain back into, it's like kind of almost catching your brain and saying like, hey, no, focus on this. Forget about that. You can't stop it, but you can at least acknowledge those for what they are, which is those negative thoughts are really just predictions that are unlikely to happen, right? They're very improbable, yet your brain tends to focus on them. So choose consciously to focus on the positives, and that will really help for you to be able to move on. Okay, so some relationship advice, probably not something that you expect to see, but hey, this is all about being healthy, and of course being emotionally healthy is a super important aspect of your overall health. So I hope that's helpful. Share this with anyone that you think could benefit from it. Certainly lots of people going through breakups and separations all the time, and this was a simple exercise that I found super valuable. All right, until next week, have a great Easter weekend, and we'll talk to you soon.